Mrs. Flood burst onto our screens in the 2023 Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, immediately puzzling fans with her uncanny knowledge of the TARDIS and its pilot. She pesters Ruby's mother about that strange police box and even encourages Ruby Sunday to join the Doctor. Yet all along, she knows much more than she lets on. In a shocking meta-twist, Temple of Geek notes that in her first episode, she breaks the fourth wall, revealing to the audience that she knows the true nature of the TARDIS. By episode's end, she snaps to camera that the Doctor's story will end in absolute terror, a line delivered with chilling calm that has tongues wagging in fandom. Who exactly is this silver-haired stranger, and why is she hinting at doom for our hero? That's the mystery we're diving into today. Even before the Doctor's story ends in terror, Mrs. Flood has dropped other heavy clues. In later episodes, The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, she ominously warns Cherry Sunday that a storm is coming in. He waits no more. Temple of Geek also points out that this alludes to Sutek's return and other cosmic threats. Then she flatly tells Mrs. Sunday, "Tell your maker I will come down to storm his gates of gold and seize his kingdom in my true name." Dialogue that sounds like a rebel god speaking. Yet when the Doctor saves the day by resetting time, Mrs. Flood is all smiles, calling him a clever boy, as if relieved. These scenes, a nosy neighbour who casually knows about pantheons of gods, have only deepened the intrigue. Clearly, Mrs. Flood is far from an ordinary grandma, and her cryptic warning set the stage for bigger revelations. Most recently, Mrs. Flood delivered a tantalizing teaser in the episode Lux. As Radio Times reports, she pops up in 1950s Miami, pointing at the vanishing TARDIS and quipping, "If you want to see a good show, darling, show ends May the 24th. That May the 24th is no random date. It's the very date companion Belinda Chandra is struggling to reach home. And it's also the air date of the season finale. In other words, Mrs. Flood is telegraphing a deadline. The Radio Times also notes that someone or something is stopping the TARDIS from landing on that date, making her warning a coded clue to the big season's cliffhanger. And showrunner Russell T. Davies has confirmed Mrs. Flood's true identity will finally be revealed at the end of this season. In short, pay attention to that May the 24th warning. It's both an in-universe portent and a meta countdown to the finale's mystery solving. Now, beyond her dialogue, Mrs. Flood's very look screams Doctor Who Easter egg. In the snowy rooftop scene, she appears in a long white fur-lined coat with a matching hood and carries an ornate white parasol.
But life goes on, doesn't it? Ruthlessly. And what happens, you might wonder? Oh, what happens to that mysterious traveller in time and space known as the Doctor? I'm sorry to say his story ends in absolute terror. Night-night.
Perhaps fans of classic Who will recognise this, as Mary Tamm's Romana 1 debuted wearing a nearly identical white fur cloak and even a frilly parasol in the Ribos operation. Den of Geek even quips that Mrs. Flood's costume seems to be literally saying, "Hi, I'm Romana." I mean, imagine the Doctor's surprise if his old companion turned up like this. All the trappings, the vintage suitcase, travel stickers, even a big gold ring on her finger reinforce that she's a seasoned time traveller out of central casting. Just as striking is her pure white palette. In Ribos Operation, Romana was tasked by the cosmic White Guardian of Time. Now, Mrs. Flood looks like the Guardian incarnate. Temple of Geek observes that her white attire at the end of the episode is a symbolic gesture, representing her as the White Guardian. Indeed, fans have noted her regal bearing, omniscient air, and the very colour scheme all echo the White Guardian from classic Doctor Who. A Doctor Who companion article points out that, like the Guardians of old, Mrs. Flood comes across as omniscient and even breaks the fourth wall, a rare meta move reminiscent of those godlike figures. The parallels don't just stop there. On her parasol's handle, one even spots a crystal reminiscent of the key to Time's gem. In short, every detail of Mrs. Flood's outfit seems drawn straight from Doctor Who lore, especially the Romana Guardian era, rather than a random old lady wardrobe. In Doctor Who's recent episodes, including The Church on Ruby Road, The Legend of Ruby Sunday, and Empire of Death, the mysterious Mrs. Flood has appeared, issuing ominous warnings, like I say, even breaking the fourth wall. For example, she once stood on the snow footop in that white fur coat and declared, "I'm going to bring absolute terror." Other lines, like warning of the storm coming, he waits no more.
There's a storm coming in. He waits no more.
And telling a character to tell your maker, "I will come to storm down his gates of gold," all hint at cosmic knowledge. But who is she really? In this video, we will examine 10 major fan theories about Mrs. Flood's identity one by one. Each theory will include a brief background, a reason it could fit the clues, and a reason it probably doesn't.
Good luck.
Let's start with theory 1, Susan Foreman. Now, Susan Foreman is the Doctor's original companion and his granddaughter. First seen in the 1963 series. As a Gallifreyan, she grew up in the TARDIS and knows all about time travel. Carol Ann Ford, who played Susan, even hinted that Susan might still be alive after leaving Earth. Now, here's why it could be her. Mrs. Flood frequently references the Doctor's family and even mentions Susan by name. She clearly knows the TARDIS well. This has led to some wonder if Mrs. Flood isn't Susan in disguise. After all, Susan has a long history with the TARDIS and could have returned to Earth in older age or after another adventure, perhaps. Her knowledge of time travel might explain how she seems to predict events. But the Susan we met was kind and naive and not a sinister figure. Mrs. Flood's villainous appearing behaviour, standing with an umbrella promising absolute terror, clashes with Susan's established gentle nature. Moreover, Russell T Davies has stressed that Mrs. Flood is a new villain, and bringing back Susan, who famously left for a normal life without hint in years, seems unlikely. If Susan were alive and well, she'd more likely reveal herself outright rather than lurking as a creepy neighbour. Theory number 2, the Master. Now, the Master is the Doctor's arch enemy and also a renegade Time Lord. They have regenerated into many forms, male and female, and are known for elaborate schemes and disguises. So what's in favour of this theory is that as a Time Lord, the Master would easily know the Doctor and his family. He often hides in plain sight, pretending to be friendly until the last minute. And Mrs. Flood's knowledge of the TARDIS and her theatrical style could fit a disguised Master. In fact, the Radio Times noted that many fans consider another Time Lord, be it the Master or someone similar, as a likely suspect. If the Master wanted to torment Ruby's Circle, posing as a kindly neighbour who unexpectedly spouts prophecy would be on brand. However, showrunner Russell T Davies has explicitly said that the Master is kind of parked for now, effectively taking the Master out of play for this season. So that suggests that the Master isn't involved. Also, Mrs. Flood's cryptic religious language and concern about a godlike threat in the form of Sutek don't really match the Master's usual motives. The Master's usually gloating and engages the Doctor directly, not muttering warnings to an old lady. Finally, Mrs. Flood calls the Doctor clever boy, a phrase used by other villains like Davros, but not typically something the Master would say. Theory number 3, the White Guardian. Now, the White Guardian is a cosmic deity-like figure representing order and goodness, seen in the 1970s Doctor Who episodes. He is essentially a benevolent Time Lord of immense power. So, what we do know is that Mrs. Flood's all-white appearance, and she's often seen in white fur, as we know, and grandiose language might symbolically nod to the White Guardian. Lines like storming gates of gold and speaking of a maker, that has the ring of mythic authority. It's conceivable that the White Guardian took human form to intervene. His colour scheme would match Mrs. Flood's white coat. If so, her cryptic warnings could be him trying to steer the Doctor or Ruby's family towards a destined outcome. But the White Guardian is inherently good, not a villain. He would never really threaten absolute terror or harm innocents. He's also canonically male, even when out of physical form, and not that that's a big thing for Doctor Who these days, and is typically depicted as wise and kind. Mrs. Flood's sadistic apologizing, "I'm so sorry it ends like this. I had such plans," does not really fit a kindly cosmic protector. Furthermore, the White Guardian has never broken the fourth wall or displayed the creepy eccentricity that Mrs. Flood shows. So for those reasons, the White Guardian seems, at least to me, to be an unlikely fit. Next up, in theory number 4, we have Romana. Now, Romana is a Time Lady and former companion to the 4th Doctor. She later became the president of Gallifrey. She's clever, adventurous, and Romana often acted as the Doctor's equal. Now, in its favour with this theory, Romana knows the Doctor's world intimately, and like Susan, she could easily pilot or even hide in a TARDIS. If Romana wanted to observe Ruby or protect her, adopting a new identity on Earth is very possible. Her background as a Time Lord, and even as Gallifrey's leader, means she has the resources to alter her appearance entirely. The Radio Times article, Another Time Lord Theory, even listed Romana among the suspects. But, going against Romana, her personality is typically witty and charismatic, far from Mrs. Flood's grim, quiet menace. We've never seen Romana act hostile or cryptic. She usually confronts foes openly. Additionally, Romana's era has very different vibes than Mrs. Flood's old-fashioned wardrobe and ominous tone. There's no canonical hint that Romana went rogue or had a hidden agenda, and without any direct clues like a regeneration or mention of her name, Romana does not strongly match Mrs. Flood's behaviour. Theory number 5, the Ronnie. Now, the Ronnie is another renegade Time Lady from classic Doctor Who. A brilliant but amoral scientist, she would kidnap people for experiments. In the 5th and 7th Doctor era, she was a recurring villain. Now, the Ronnie fits the profile of a female Time Lord with villainous intent perfectly. If Mrs. Flood is a disguised Time Lady, the Ronnie would definitely be a candidate. The Ronnie's scientific curiosity could explain strange occurrences like Ruby's broken time filters and might motivate her to study Ruby's family. Undercover as Mrs. Flood, she could manipulate events in the background. Going against this theory, the Ronnie's known schemes are overtly scientific or resource gathering, not mystical prophecies. Mrs. Flood's lines about true names and gods, that doesn't sound like the Ronnie's usual style, which is more technical. Also, the Ronnie's voice and mannerisms are quite distinctive, whereas Mrs. Flood speaks in a muted, ominous tone. Finally, the Ronnie was never hinted to be around Earth in the 20th, 21st century. And she famously says, "Ronnie's back," not absolute terror. In short, there's little evidence, no name, no technology gimmicks linking Mrs. Flood to the Ronnie. But in at number 6 for a theory is the Trickster of the Pantheon of Discord. Now, the Trickster Lord is a chaos deity from the Sarah Jane Adventures and also hinted at, very briefly mentioned in Doctor Who, as a member of the Pantheon of the Discord. He manipulates time and reality for mischief. Now, the idea of the Pantheon has been explicitly used this season repeatedly, with characters like Toymaker and Maestro and in Lux, so the Trickster would fit this category of powerful being. Notably, in the Legend of Ruby Sunday, there are flying filter spears that, when broken, alter reality, very reminiscent of the Trickster's modus operandi. Mrs. Flood, arriving after these chaos events, suggests she might be a patron of that chaos, reveling in the confusion. If part of that pantheon, she could be embodying one of its members, perhaps a trickster-esque figure to sow fear. Against this theory, the Trickster in canon has a very playful, almost whimsical personality, which clashes with Mrs. Flood's grim menace. He was also defeated on Sarah Jane's world, and it's never been shown on screen in Doctor Who itself. There's no explicit reference to the Trickster by name in any of these episodes. Mrs. Flood's dialogue, talking about makers and divine names, sounds more solemn than the Trickster's usual taunting. While it's an interesting link, there's no concrete hint that she's specifically the Trickster Lord, so this remains speculative. But moving on to theory number 7, we have Sutek. Sutek is an ancient Osiran god of destruction, first seen in the 4th Doctor's Pyramids of Mars. He was imprisoned on Mars for millennia, but managed to escape hitching a ride on the TARDIS. Now, this theory posits that Mrs. Flood is Sutek either in disguise or in reincarnation. Mrs. Flood explicitly warns of Sutek's imminent arrival. A storm coming in, he waits no more, and speaks like someone who knows him. In Empire of Death, she chants about storming gates of gold in a true name. Very godlike imagery. If Mrs. Flood were Sutek, she could be plotting his return or sowing fear as he once did. Sutek's original form was physically monstrous, but in the Whoviverse, he might be able to use any appearance. Against this theory, though, Sutek's canonical personality is all about destruction and chaos with delight. Mrs. Flood, however, appears sad and apologetic when things go wrong. I'm so sorry I had such plans. That doesn't fit Sutek's grim glee at annihilation. Also, Sutek's symbol is Egyptian-themed, animals, pyramids, whereas Mrs. Flood is a modern English housewife. Quite importantly, Sutek was male, never shown as female, and was convinced dead. Given Mrs. Flood seems to prevent catastrophes by restoring lives at the end of the episode, it's more likely she opposes Sutek than is him. Theory number 8, the Doctor's mother. Now, who is the Doctor's mother? She's a nearly unknown figure in Doctor Who canon. So far, the Doctor has rarely mentioned her, and Gallifreyan records have hinted at her existence, but given no name or details. If she exists and is alive, she would understand Time Lord matters intimately, though. Perhaps she could take the name Flood and adopt an innocuous persona to keep an eye on her son from afar. Her concern for the Doctor's story, in the final scene she speaks about the Doctor's fate, could stem from a parental standpoint. A mother might speak cryptically to test the Doctor or his family, fitting Mrs. Flood's secretive nature. But almost nothing is known about the Doctor's mother in TV canon, and there's no precedent for her having powers or longevity. Mrs. Flood's behaviour, undermining events on Earth and mentioning gods, sounds far beyond anything a non-time travelling mother would do. Mrs. Flood also doesn't show any obvious familial tenderness. She's quite distant. The emotion she shows, "I'm sorry, little woman," seems concerned but not clearly maternal. Given the lack of clues in her villainous turn, plotting terror, this theory has no hard evidence and feels more imaginative than based on actual lore. Theory number 9 is a wild one, that Mrs. Flood is the Doctor themselves. Now, this theory suggests that Mrs. Flood might actually be the Doctor, either current incarnation or a future incarnation in disguise. We know that the Doctor often outsmarts enemies with disguises, and on one memorable occasion even pretended to be on his own TARDIS crew. The Doctor's life involves time loops and hidden agendas, so it's quite possible he would adopt an elderly alias to protect Ruby without telling her it's him. If Mrs. Flood is the Doctor, it might explain why she knows the Doctor's entire story. She is him. The early scene where Ruby asks about the burglar, why was he standing in front of her phone box with a parachute, got an oddly knowing reaction. Perhaps only the Doctor would make that connection. However, the Doctor is strongly ethical and transparent with his friends. He wouldn't hide behind a creepy facade, spout ominous threats, or lie to his companions in the way that Mrs. Flood does. Also, she calls the Doctor clever boy, as if she's someone else. The Doctor wouldn't really address himself that way. And finally, in universe, there's no hint that the Doctor would need to disguise himself as Mrs. Flood. Nothing about Mrs. Flood's identity matches the current Doctor. This makes the theory, at least in my view, pretty unlikely. Theory number 10 is my absolute favourite and my pick as most likely, River Song. Now, River Song, born Melody Pond, is a time-travelling archaeologist and the Doctor's wife. She's regenerated several times, lived her life out of order, and has a mysterious, adventurous personality. Now, in favour of this, River has intimate knowledge of Gallifreyan tech and the Doctor's life. She often appears under aliases like Amy Pond or Melody Malone, and might have reason to safeguard others behind the scenes. Perhaps River, freed from known timelines after library wars, took a secret identity on Earth to help Ruby's family. If so, she would understand the Doctor's importance to Ruby's story and might smile at seemingly odd coincidences. Not to mention the whole River, Pond, Flood connection. Against this, though, River's character is very bold, witty, and outspoken, which isn't really like the retiring, menacing Mrs. Flood. She doesn't really talk in riddles. Her record is full of sass and action, not Victorian parasols. The lines Mrs. Flood uses, I'm sorry, it ends like this, prophetic warnings, unlike anything River normally says. Moreover, if Mrs. Flood were River, we'd expect some kind of clue, a familiar turn of phrase or reference, which we don't get. River's known story arcs from the library ended with her quietly living happily ever after. No canonical hint suggests she became an old housewife terrorizing people. This theory is creative, but I have to admit it is unsupported by any episode detail. So in conclusion, each theory tries to match Mrs. Flood's strange behaviour, her knowledge of the Doctor and cosmic events, her cryptic dialogue, and her on-screen persona. And we've seen that Susan Foreman fits some hints, familiarity with the TARDIS being one of them, but not her new villainous tone. The Master and Romana are Gallifreyans who know the Doctor, but official sources have effectively ruled out the Master for now, and nothing ties Romana explicitly to these events. The White Guardian and Trickster introduce cosmic angles, echoing Mrs. Flood's godlike language, but neither matches her demeanour perfectly. Sutek, or the Doctor's mother, would explain her warnings of disaster, yet their personalities clash with what we see. The idea that Mrs. Flood is the Doctor or River Song gives a personal twist, but again, the evidence, or lack thereof, doesn't hold up to scrutiny. At the end of the day, Mrs. Flood remains an enigma, a figure who has already broken the fourth wall twice and teased a very happy ending for little Ruby, while warning about absolute terror. The final reveal of her true identity is said to come in the season 15 finale, or season 2 finale if you prefer. Until then, all we can do is analyze every line, outfit, and ominous glance for clues. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Doctor Who lore, please make sure to subscribe to Hailing Frequencies for more theory videos and analyses. Hit the bell icon to never miss an episode, and let us know in the comments which Mrs. Flood theory you think is most likely, or is it something completely different? Until next time, keep watching the skies and the neighbourly octogenarians.